This is the Discuss Metal Podcast with Jesse Hawley of the Satire. Hosted by Dan Terry. Presented by discussmetal.com.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the Discuss Metal Podcast. My name is Dan. I will be your host this evening and most evenings when you're listening to this podcast. And with me tonight is Jesse Hawley of the Satire. How are you doing tonight, man?
Doing pretty good. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I heard your guys' new single, and by heard it, I mean I've listened to it about 48 times. And it really blew me out of the water, man.
Dude, that makes me feel good because we need those digital plays.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean it was not. I'm not going to even lie. Like I had Travis, your drummer, on a while back, and we talked a little bit about this. He was like, "Oh yeah, man, it's more brutal or whatever." And like I've heard like the songs that were released a long time ago where it was like different everybody, and so, I was kind of like, okay, what can I expect from this band? And then a couple weeks later, you guys dropped it and with an actual video, which was kind of cool.
That's all Brian.
Yeah, I've noticed that he's got a little bit of an obsession with Zoom.
Yeah, he's trying to market us better and the blamed better. So everything is like snippets of studio play.
Well, he's doing a good job for sure, because I'm definitely getting, just like seeing like the interviews and stuff that are getting posted and all of that stuff. It's been cool. But yeah, so I guess we'll get into the Satire and the presence and all of that stuff here in a little bit. But I just wanted to start off just as bare bones as I possibly can, and just ask where you grew up and what got you into. Number one, what made you a fan of music, specifically this type of music, and what got you into deciding that you wanted to play music?
So for me, it's kind of a convoluted story. I grew up in a Baptist pastor's church home. So my dad was the Baptist pastor, and as kids, like there wasn't a ton of exposure outside of like just classic rock. So, the 50s, 60s, 70s, like oldies, stuff like that. And that was on all the time. But anything outside of that, I wasn't even exposed to. Like Nirvana happened and I didn't even know about it, type of thing. So for me, music was a big deal. Everywhere we went, we had music on in the car. And then we would have music like for like moments throughout the day. So my dad would wake us up with wake up songs and stuff like that. Like Crocodile Rock by like Elton John was one of those morning routine things. So music was like a big deal, but it wasn't anything that was my own. And that was okay because I was really into it, but I also wasn't aware of like individual bands. So over time, things started changing in life. My parents actually separated and got divorced. And in that season, it was kind of like a who are you type of person. And for like 4 or 5 years, there's this season where I didn't really have much investment in like a personal identity, and music was something that started to grow in that season. And I remember in 8th grade discovering No Doubt. This one girl did like a report in school about this band, and I was like, this is pretty good. So it was funny because it's the first thing I ever latched onto for my own. And at the same time, I started to kind of dig into some of like the later Beatles albums and things like that, things that I think are more musically rich as opposed to some of their other material. So like Magical Mystery Tour and stuff like that were a big deal for me. So I remember sitting in the back of the car with a cassette and just playing that album cover to cover. But over time, I was one of those loner kids, and I wouldn't have a whole lot of friends. And that I think was kind of a result of really not knowing who I was. I didn't fit in with the jocks, and I didn't fit in with the like the straight-laced kids. So the kids that were very accepting would be those potheads or the metal kids or the skaters or whatever. And of course, I'm going to start to absorb what they're into. And freshman year in high school, I had a friend, and he knew I was in the school band and I played drums. And my mom was cool enough to have picked up a drum set for me. And there's kind of a recurring theme in my story of I want to be able to do things, but I'm not skilled enough to do them. But I'm still going to be like, yeah, I can do this. And with him early on, I was like, yeah, I play drums. And he played guitar and he sang. And he's like, well, you should play drums for me. And I was like, what music do you listen to? He's like, I listen to Ozzy Osbourne and Black Sabbath. And I was like, what's that? So he gave me a mixtape, and it had, on the A side, it had Black Sabbath, had Paranoid, and it had Nativity in Black.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, I mean, it's like musical trinity right there.
Yeah, it's like a startup kit. Yeah.
Seriously, I think anybody who went to Hot Topic in 8th grade got that for free. But
right.
They had that, and then it also had Metallica Ride the Lightning and Metallica Fade to Black, and I think it had a song by The Cream on there too. But those songs, I would say, legitimately changed the direction of my life. Over time, he's like, well, I want you to play drums for me. And I was like, well, I still got to learn material or whatever. And he finally called my bluff one day, and he just came over, and I went as far as to sit behind my drum set. And I was like, yeah, I'm not very good at playing the drums. So yeah. It was kind of like this soft whimper of failure, but it didn't work. But he kind of hooked me into music. So I've always had this love for classic rock and like oldies, but then like freshman year, this just exploded. And at the same time, I was listening to some of your podcast episodes, and it sounds like you were a big nu metal kid.
I was, yeah.
Kind of ashamed, but kind of not ashamed. I was huge into nu metal. And I remember watching the video for Freak on a Leash, and I was like, this is incredible. And then shortly after, I discovered Tool. You discover all those big bands, and there's still bands in that genre that I absolutely love. Like Seven Dust to me is an amazing band.
Oh yeah, totally.
But in that season, like I started kind of becoming my own person, like rubber stamping my own identity type of thing, and it was totally wrapped around music. But it was this like pseudo mall goth thing, and it was mine. But it wasn't like the most authentic thing. Like you go to Hot Topic and you get your kickwear pants and your Jenko jeans and all that stuff that you're like, yeah, I did that. I'm sorry. But that was mine. That was me. And this new like person kind of born out of all that was there now. So that's kind of really my birth into like harder music. And I started going to shows. Like I would start traveling out of state to go to good shows. And I remember around, I graduated in high school in 2002. So right at the end of 2002, I had friends in our church youth group who were really big into punk. And I was always like, dude, punk's stupid. Why do you like that? Like they don't have dreads, But it wasn't my thing, but they were good friends and started telling me about this thing called Cornerstone. And I was like, what's that? And it was funny because right before Cornerstone, my friend's band had gone on like a Midwest tour, and they were going to do a breakup show, and the Blamed and Head Noise played that show. And so I went to that. That was my first exposure to punk, and that's my first exposure to like Christian music, like in the like this underground scene.
So before that, when you were saying that your friends are into punk and punk is stupid, what was your perception of punk to that point? Were you just thinking about like the pop punk bands like Green Day or?
No, I mean, I had friends who were into like UK Subs and all the authentic punk, but I didn't get it. I'm like, why do you wear tight jeans? And like, what's with your hair, dude? That looks stupid. But I'm like, whatever. I mean, I look like a complete idiot if you look at pictures from 2002 when I'm trying to be goth,
Yeah.
But
I'll send you a picture of me from that same year whenever we're done doing this. I think you'll get. I think we're on the same page on that. Yeah.
It's just bad. There's certain things we try not to talk about. So why not spill it on your podcast? But
yeah, why not? It's fine.
It wasn't my thing, and I have this frame of mind, and it followed me well into hardcore, like through the different iterations of hardcore, where I'm like, this is what I like, so this is the best, and that's kind of what was going on there with punk. But shortly after going to that show, he's like, hey, do you want to go to Cornerstone? So I went to Cornerstone, and I didn't know even what to engage in because he was very much into punk. So like I think the first show we went to was Combat Junkies, and then from there, like he's like, I don't know what you're gonna want to watch, and I'm like, well, I don't know any of these bands. And main stage that year was POD and Project 86.
Oh, nice.
I saw both of them, and that was good. But I mean, it's main stage, so it's cool and all, but there's like 2,000 people there and you can barely walk. But that same night, Zayo and Sacrifice played back to back, and that's when I was like, oh my god, what is this? Like, Live Sacrifice was on first, and it was just intense and insane. And then Zayo came on, and I'm like, this is scary. Like, what is this? And it was super intimidating. Brian Clark came out and sang and to my hand, and I'm like, this guy looks like a biker. I think he's into somebody. But that's kind of my journey through music.
That's cool. That's really cool. Yeah, and I had a very similar journey myself, coming from the new metal stuff, which actually in 2020, it's cool to like new metal again. So we've at least got that going for us.
I'm like it's just cultural de-evolution. I like some new metal. I like new metal. It's nostalgic. It's like cotton candy. Like you can have it once in a while, and it's not bad. But I couldn't listen to it every day. But then I see these bands that are like totally ripping off new metal, and they're just putting hardcore vocals over. I'm like, yeah, that's not good, man.
Yeah. It's some of them I like, but I haven't dug too deep into it. I know there's this band called Issues, which has like new metal music, but their vocals sound like something that you hear from a boy band. And I was like, yeah, that's kind of
really,
yeah, that's kind of weird. Like whenever it was described to me, I was like, I guess I have to check it out. I checked it out and I was like, okay, yeah, I can definitely not find a place in my heart for this. So I'm gonna just move past it.
I was reading somewhere that most people stop listening to new music like in their mid-30s, and I was like, well, I'm not done discovering new music. I'm definitely going backwards and like picking up all those hardcore bands from like the late 90s, early 2000s that I missed. But I don't want to listen to new music. Like I just discovered Knock Loose and See You Space Cowboy and stuff like that. So I'm trying to not be that, but it's that stubborn, this is what's good, and I'm not going to listen to anything else attitude that I get stuck in sometimes.
Yeah, no, I definitely can relate to that in a big way. So besides the I can't actually play the drums very well debacle, what got you interested in actually wanting to be in a band?
I would sit on the couch and watch MTV and VH1 for hours, and there's an awe to watching some of these bands live. I remember the Metallica Behind the Music documentary they would do, and they'd play Fade to Black, and it just gave me chills. But I have no physical musical ability. Like I can turn the radio on and turn the knob. It's pretty awesome.
Right.
But like I can't pick up a guitar, and I have horrible internal rhythm, so drums are kind of out of the question. But the same group of friends from that youth group, their band broke up, and after that Cornerstone, they kind of reformed with different members. And one of the dudes who ended up in Color Morale was in the band, and he's kind of a local friend, and was in the band, but he was always jumping to other bands, and he was only in that band for a short period of time. And there was this opening, and I'm like, hey, I could sing for you guys. And they're like, really? I'm like, yeah, I totally could. And it was that idea of, I just really want to do it, so I'm going to can do it. And they're like, well, we'll do it. I was like, well, I need time to practice, So they let it ride for like a week or two. And the one guy ended up telling me, hey, we want to hear next like Thursday or whatever. So I remember not even having attempted to sing for like a good chunk of those 2-3 weeks. It was like, it's going to happen or whatever. And as we got closer to that day, I was like, well, I should start screwing around with it. And this like sound kind of like crappy Dead to Fall started to come out.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, maybe they'll take it. So I remember going to their house, and we were in their garage, and I like belted out 2 lines, and they're like, okay. So my guitarist, who was my closest friend at the time, he's like, yeah, we totally took you with the intention of having you as a placeholder and somebody better, but you got better, so that worked. So I was like, well, thank you. So cool. But it's just kind of like that fake it till you make it thing, and it worked out. So
absolutely, that's awesome though that you were able to produce something. I remember the first time I tried screaming in my old band, Jelly Donut, and we had started off as kind of like a trying to do mostly clean vocals. It was new metal, you know. And then I heard like Norma Jean and Zayo and that stuff, and I was like, oh, I want to try to do that, whatever. But man, it took me like a couple of months to even be able to produce a sound that was even close to that. So hats off to you for being able to actually pull something out, you know, for a tryout or something.
I like farted into the mic or something, and it came out good.
Well, you know, early on, the best thing you can do is cup the mic, you know?
Yeah. It's bad because like my whole reference was new metal, and I had just seen Living Sacrifice and Zayo and Embodiment. So I was kind of like, there's this other thing. And like shortly after Cornerstone, I picked up Underworld, Change in the Times, and Norma Jean, Bless the Martyr. So I had like a nice little like value pack of like, this is what's good. But I still had this very new metal worldview. So I remember we were trying stuff, and the way I would comport myself like in practice was very much like a new metal singer. And I remember like I would move, they're like, what are you doing? And I was like, this is what people in bands do. And they're like, that's stupid.
Right.
It was a sharp learning curve.
For sure. New metal was on the decline then. So, you know, when you described seeing Zayo for the first time as being, you know, somewhat scary, was it like kind of like, was that kind of sort of shocking? It was shocking for me the first time I heard Dan sing. And just realizing that there was like this whole other tier of heaviness that bands could produce. Cause like, but at that point, like that, my heaviest reference point would have been like Slipknot or something. And just thinking at the time that it was like literally the most extreme thing that anybody could do vocally. What effect did that have on you as far as like, was it for a lot of people, they say the first time they heard Dan sing, it was revulsion, you know? But did it scare you, or was it like kind of a morbid curiosity after that?
So their live show was intimidating. Their live show was like Dan's huddled in front of the drums, partially on a knee, and he's screaming this wall into the mic. And Russ is doing what Russ, he had to have knee surgery 20 times. And it's just this like, it's a dark tent, and there's a lot of people pushing on you, and there's this wall of sound, and it's brooding. It's intimidating. But when I bought their CD, I bought self-titled at that like same window of time. And I was like, this isn't that good. Like I had bought Hammering Process, and I'm like, Hammering Process is excellent. This other thing, I don't know about it. And self-titled sat in a CD book for like months, and I didn't have a ton of money, so you would listen to the same albums constantly, and after a couple of months you kind of get a little burned out, like I need to listen to something else. So I remember putting in self-titled, and I was like, clicked, and I was like, holy cow, this is insane. And just everything about that album's unique, like everything from the drums to like just some of the different songs, like Witch Hunter. Everything in that song that album is unique. It's heavy. It's different, even though it's not like, I mean, they definitely took that stuff from other places, but it just made a unique package. And when it clicked, it was like light bulb. This is special. It's
funny. I think you're the first person I've ever talked to whose first Zayo album was self-titled. And that's cool.
I get offended when people say that they hate those drums. I'm like, dude, those drums are awesome.
Even the dudes in the band hate the drums. I don't know where you stand.
I know they do, but I'm like, you're wrong, because I'm all right.
I'll say this. I'm not like a big fan of obviously digitized drums, but I will say this, that, it's not like they were trying to hide it or make it weird or anything. Like they weren't trying to make some sort of like fool people into thinking that they were playing real drums. this record that record wouldn't have sounded the way that it did without those drums, and it wouldn't have created the same sort of atmosphere. I mean, they were doing like a Zayo meets Nine Inch Nails kind of thing, and and I think ultimately there are places where I feel like in the heavier songs it would be nicer to not have the digitized drum sound, but you like you said, you get used to it and it clicks, and you're like, okay, this is all. The fact that it was all intentional choice makes it more valid to me than like, Jesse couldn't play these parts or something, so we digitized them. All of those drums are played by Jesse on a digitized kit. You can tell. So I think in that regard, I think there's only I think maybe the song Witch Hunter not Witch Hunter, Alive is Dead. I think that one they might actually be programmed, or he's just really good at sounding like it was programmed. But yeah, I don't hate them, but it's not my favorite Zayo record. I'll just say that. But
dude, you're cutting me deep. I might have to hang up.
I'm sorry. I know it can get really intense.
I think I would be interested, kind of like what they did with Saint Anger, where they replaced those drums. I'd be interested in hearing them with normal drums, but I feel in my gut it's too much a part of like the memory stamp of what that album is, where I'd be like, yeah, it doesn't work, even if it's better.
Yeah,
it's kind of like when you get those bad recordings from when you and I were in high school, like some of the Seven Angels, Seven Plagues albums. Some of those recordings are really bad, but that became a part of the sound.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
So I think I'd have a hard time walking away with it.
Right. So what was that like as far as like becoming a vocalist, and doing that as your primary instrument, in the sense that like, I don't think a lot of people talk about this, but like, I was talking to TJ Miller from Still Remains last week, and he was saying that it was always just a struggle to output at that level at all times, So did you find it, kind of challenging to that point? Because I know I blew my voice out 3 or 4 times in the beginning, just not really knowing how to project correctly, or or like play, or like sit there and play, like even a 30-minute set was like torture. Did you have any struggle like that?
I had like an old videotape of one we had practiced early on, and I had not watched it for a long time, and I popped it in one time. And there was things my voice was able to do then that I can't do now. And I'm pretty sure I just damaged it over time. Because, like you said, there's not a very strong playbook on how to do this right. And there's that chick in New York who teaches people how to breathe and everything. And I've watched some of her stuff, and I just have a hard time applying it. But for me, like definitely the couple years I was in my primary band early on, like my voice changed, and I think that just kind of was like when you're just beating it into submission and your body kind of got used to it. But near the end of that first run in that first band I was in, whenever we would sing, I would get like sinus headaches and issues like for days afterwards. So playing longer sets or playing multiple shows in a weekend just beat me up. And it did become a problem. And I actually kind of thought I was done. And when I stepped away from that first band I was in, I was kind of stepping away with the intention of, I don't think I'm going to do this anymore. But you have that itch to keep doing it. So another opportunity came up. And when I dove into it again, it was bad. Like it took me a while to kind of get to where I needed to be, but it still was a problem for me. And I actually quit that band and was done for an extended period of time, with the exception of one-offs here and there for friends. And when I joined the Satire, I was like, if I'm going to do this, I need to do it right. So I looked up warm-up practices and breathing techniques, and it's helped a lot. And singing with Brian's helped a lot, because he helps kind of address delivery, not in the sense that like how to sing, but how to do it in a way that plays to my strengths. And I think that helps too.
Sure. Well, and so how did you end up getting in touch with Brian and the Satire?
It's kind of a very weird, convoluted story. I don't know how familiar you are with the Satire and its like long history, but it's been around since like 03, 04. And I mean, There's been like 20 different people in the band. Lance Garvin was in it at one point. Like, just a lot of different people been in this band. And the more solidified lineup was like in like their like 2005, 2006. And Brian and I had always kind of crossed paths at Cornerstone. We played shows with the Satire and stuff like that. And Brian and I were friendly. And Brian's eventual bass player was a good friend of mine. And there was a particular lineup of the Satire in the early 2000s, and they needed a singer. And Brian was going to reach out to me, and a couple guys in the band overruled him because they and I were not on good terms because of women in her life. Like, they wanted to date my girlfriend, that type of thing.
Sure.
So there was, typical band problems.
Absolutely. Yeah.
It didn't work out. But Brian told me years later that he always kind of had me in the back of his mind, and we lost connection. I got married. I went to college, finished my master's, all this different stuff, and life kind of just took hold. And I'm a pretty faith-based person, and I have a passion for like working with teenagers because I think life's pretty ugly. And there was this National Day of Prayer thing, and I was at our church, and I was praying, and I was like, "Hey God, whatever I got, you can have." And I was like, I like, if you want me to burn CDs for these kids, I'll burn them. If you want me to do show promotion, I'll do show promotion. And like, just kind of on a whim, I was like, "Hey, if you want me to sing again, I don't even know if I can sing again. I will." Literally the next day, my friend who played bass reached out to me. He's like, "Hey, do you want to sing Satire?" Like, what? Like, where did that come from?
Yeah.
And then of course he goes, now Jim Chaffin from the Crucifieds in the band, and Sid from Head Noises in the band. And I'm like, so it's Brian, Sid, and Jim, like, hero worship. I was like, I don't even think I can sing, but yes, let's go do it,
Right.
And I was, again, the idea of trying to fake it till you make it, because I just wanted to rub elbows with these guys for a little bit. And went and did it, and Brian is like super gracious. It was just me and him. I was straight with him. I was like, "Dude, I don't even know if I can sing anymore. It's been some time since I've done this. And when I did it, it was pretty bad." And the first time I went back to do it with him, he was very much like that producer, that coach, father figure. He's like, "You're doing good. Just keep trying, keep trying." And it shortly into it came back. It wasn't powerful. It wasn't strong. But like in successive practices, you could really start to see it flesh out. And we played that audio feed that year, and it was nice to kind of get back in a rhythm. And of course, Brian does things on a level that I hadn't been able to. So that was just kind of added bonus.
Yeah, totally. That's awesome. It's literally every dude that does what we do as far as like screaming and not really, because like I'm the same. I don't play an instrument and anything like that, and so it's really cool to feel valued in that way, because I always felt like, man, there's a million dudes sitting in basements right now that could be a singer, yeah. But to have a friend like Brian Gray and they're kind of like, yeah, I think you can do it, and I think a lot of that blockage too is, I think a lot of it is a mental thing too, more
Totally.
so than a vocal ability. Cause like your voice is going to do what your voice is going to do, unless you've had like throat surgery or something since, since the last time you sang. Cause I remember, when I was talking a lot about Furnace Fest before it got rescheduled, I was talking to Jason from Few Left Standing, and I was asking, like, how did those practices go after you guys were inactive for so long? And he was like, yeah, I don't know, man. It was just one of those, like, he's like, our singer wasn't sure if he could get the voice back, or get all that stuff back. He said, but it was just kind of a mental thing that once everybody was kind of together, again, you just get in that headspace, and then your body just kind of remembers what to do,
I think you're spot on. Like, I've always kind of been self-conscious of my voice, in the sense that I've never really had good recordings. So I knew I had a powerful voice live, but on recording it was never represented well. So that was always kind of like nagging in the back of my mind, like, am I good enough for this band? And there's been other singers in that band who are excellent. And I'm like, I don't want to be subpar and kind of ride the Brian train. I want to do this well. Like I'm a proud person, and I tried not to be proud and negative, but I want to do my best. So like, if I perform with him, it should be because I can hang with him. And he's been patient over time. Like he would, like I think your like a vocal arrangement, you could do it better. And like, no, this is the way I see it. And like Brian annoys the crap out of me because Brian is an excellent musician, songwriter, producer, and he sees things like 1,000 feet in the air as opposed to like directly in your face. And I'm like, well, this is what I see. And he's like, no, you're not understanding it. So he'll make like a suggestion, and I'm very stubborn, and I'll be like, no, I don't agree. And 9 times out of 10, he's right. And it takes me like some time to get there. And I'm like, you're right. But every now and then I'm right. And I'll be like, what do you mean? You were wrong. But it's a good working relationship between he and I. And it's been super fruitful because we've produced things that I can say, like, this is true quality. Done stuff before that I think is really good, but this is different and unique and on a different level. So I can step back and like, I'm proud of that.
So whenever he called you, and you kind of joined up with the band and everything, what year was that? I feel like that was some time ago.
It was 2016, and I'm Brian for everybody. I love Brian. Brian, one of the coolest people you'll ever meet. I always talk about, like, when he goes to a festival, he's the mayor. Like, everybody wants to talk to him.
Right.
And what's cool about Brian is he will make you feel special. And it's not fake. It's just something he's very good at. He's very personable. But that same vein of Brian being that people person sometimes can lead to distractions. And there was a lot of different things that were going on. The Satire, when I joined, was initially going to be the primary. And at the same window of time, they're going to do a one-off Blame show, and it blew up for them. They had a guest vocalist who was really able to kind of market a comeback for them, and eventually didn't work out with that guy. And he's a good guy, but it just didn't click. But there was now this groundswell of support for the Blame moving forward. And at the same time, Jim was playing drums for the Satire. He got really excited about doing the Blamed again, and it kind of stole the steam out of his sale for Satire, and that started to lag. So not only is the Blame moving forward, but the Satire was moving backwards. And it was difficult. Like, Brian, he knows, like, my personality, and he had a lot of patience for me, and I'd like to think that I had a lot of patience for the situation, because the Satire is a ton of me and him, and there's everybody else is involved. Like, Travis is heavily involved, and he helps develop things with drums like that. He's brought a lot to the table. And then Brad and Sid, they bring a lot, but Brian and I are the one who get together like every week, So it was hard, like, watching the Blame just like shoot off like a rocket. But we have always done stuff in the Blame. He's always asked me to do like guest vocals or background stuff, and it's always been enough to kind of hold me over. And they did a 20 years again. So they have the Blamed Again album, and he did like a 20-year anniversary of that with Lukey and Plank and all that. And I did like 4 or 5 tracks of lead vocals on that. And it was good. It scratched that itch, But finally, in the past 6-8 months, things have started slowing down for the Blamed. And they're kind of in a writing cycle, and we're in a recording cycle now. Because we have like a whole catalog of music. It's just, there's a lot going on, and both bands are distance bands, so everything just takes time. So we're now in this phase where we're pumping out stuff. Like, I think we've got 3.5 songs in the can, or close to in the can, and we've got drums for like 8 other tracks, and we're moving. So it's good. It paid off. I'm glad I didn't quit at different times, and he's been gracious to me and my irritability.
Well, and that's the whole thing, looking at it from an outsider perspective, it always seemed like it was a band that wanted to launch, but just never really quite got there. There was always something something kind of in the way, something blocking something. And I kind of get it too, in the sense that the Blamed was already kind of an established a thing, and that they were, a cornerstone kind of no pun intended in that scene. And I mean, it totally makes sense in that, like, if I do the Blamed again, I'm going to get all of this. I'm not going to say the word money, because I don't feel like that's the right word. But it's just one of those, like, we'll put it out. It'll be, as successful as it can be, versus trying to launch a band that a lot of people would have considered to be a side project band of the Blamed. And I know I viewed it that way until I talked to Travis and have talked to you a little bit about it, that it's like, no, it's actually like a for real, it's not like Brian just writes all the music and it's like, and all the lyrics and everything is like, okay, now play,
Yeah. And I mean, to be honest, I'd be cool if it was that, but he's, like I said, he's a very benevolent dictator. Like, he is the center of both those bands, and he could control everything if he wanted, but it's not the game he plays. Like, when I said that he's such a people person, like, he likes the Blame and he enjoys the Blamed, and yet he would rather pour a lot more energy into the Satire, but because he's trying to help out a lot of different people, or meet drive and energy and need in other people, he takes on all this stuff. So it at times can slow things down, but it's from a good place, and it's hard to argue with that, because in a lot of ways that's how he helps other people, so it's a cool thing.
Well, so you just released a song called The Presence, which I know you're looking for a lot of I think with that song, it definitely blew me out of the water, because I'd heard kind of some of the older stuff, which was, a different singer, different lineup, like all the really, really old stuff. And I think there's like a 3-song EP or something out there, so whenever you guys drop The Presence, what has been the reaction from people, as far as do you think this was what people were expecting? Because I feel like I'm not going to lie, it's definitely above and beyond what I was expecting to hear.
Well, I would just say that's super flattering, so I appreciate that. We put out that split with the Blamed, and our tracks kind of got lost in the shuffle in a couple different ways. Like, just I think in the general public, they kind of got lost in the shuffle, because the Blame songs on that album are phenomenal. Like, it's really good. And our stuff, we were recording it at the same time as the Blamed was, and some of the production suffered a little bit because everybody was under a time crunch. And we're actually going to be recording those 2 tracks again on this full length coming up. But we kind of expected a lot more of a subdued reaction from the single, and it's been, by our estimations, massive. Now, massive's relative, but like, it's been a much more positive response than we expected.
Well, and I can take a little bit of a stab as to why. Number one, there is a certain, like, I remember sending my buddy, whose name is also Buddy. I sent him a message and I was like, dude, you need to check out this single by the Satire. And everybody kind of, like, I do stuff like that all the time. And I think people sometimes think I'm doing that just to help people out, or give, like if I throw it up on the podcast page, people will check it out just because, like, we recommended it, But, I mean, like,
that's what a good member of the scene does. Like, we all push each other. So I get what you're saying.
Yeah. So, like, but I mean, it wasn't one of the. But I mean, I've shared stuff that I didn't 100% believe in before. But just because, like, they were my friends or whatever it was.
Yeah.
But I remember sending my buddy this message, and I was like, dude, this sounds like this sounds more like old. Like, this sounds like real, like, metalcore, hardcore, or whatever you want to call it. And I'm saying that very carefully, because I don't want it to come off sounding like it's a dated sound, because it's not. because I mean, obviously it sounds very modern, but the approach, the actual, like, it's not like a metalcore 2004, Unearthed, Killswitch Engage. I mean, I love all that stuff, but like, but I'm talking about like some of the stuff I started listening to, like Converge and Dead Guy, and that's having that sort of where it was literally just a mixture of hardcore punk and metal riffs, and so I mean it blew me away in that regard, because I hadn't heard anything like it in such a long time. Because there are a lot of bands that'll start off the way that song starts off, and then immediately you're 30 seconds in, and then it's a loud singy anthem chorus, and then it just turns into a verse chorus verse type of affair. And this was just very, very uncompromising in that regard, and it was a breath of fresh air. It reminded me of the first time I heard like Memphis Will Be Laid to Waste by Norma Jean. Like it just had that sort of immediacy to it.
Well, that's a huge compliment to me, because there's certain songs and certain albums that are timestamped forever in my brain, and that song is one of them. So, a huge compliment.
Yeah,
but it is something that we're very cognizant of. Like, everybody in the band is 30, I think 33 plus. So I'm 36 tomorrow, and like, I'm one of the younger guys in the band. We all definitely have. We all like modern music. Like, I love some of the early Born of Osiris stuff, and to me that's modern, but I know that's not modern. But stuff that's not that late 90s, early 2000s hardcore. There's stuff in our wheelhouses that we like that's that. But there's definite like things ingrained into us that is from those roots. And it's funny because we know the bones of the band is that. And like, I approach our music from a more like Dead to Fall like frame of mind, and Brian, he draws on so many like different inspirations. Like, he's a huge Fugazi fan and totally into the Refuse, and you see some of that stuff leach into formulaically into our music. And like, we'll talk like, hey, like we want this to have that strong like presence of that era that we liked, but hey, if the music goes a different place, we're cool with that. We don't want rules in what we're writing, and by the same like thought process, we don't want to write to a pattern either. But it's been interesting because for me, I come out of like that Figure 4 terror, like bleeding through. This is how I'm going to deliver vocals, and I feel like those vocal deliveries and arrangements are a lot more straightforward. And sitting down and looking at this music it's been like, I joke with him like, dude, I need to get my protractor and figure out the Pythagorean theorem with this song, because Brian, he's a lot more technical in his writing, and he definitely draws from those converges, the botches, and coalesce. And I've always been into those bands, but I've never like thought to sing like with their arrangements. So it's been a lot of doing my homework and thinking about what are they doing here and how does that apply to what I do. And I think you and I were talking recently about Bowels of Judas.
Yeah.
And that band for me has been kind of like, this is a vocal arrangement that I want to pursue when we're doing this. And it helps me kind of just sit down and study what he's doing musically to help apply it to what I'm doing. Because it's not easy for me. There's practices where we're arranging songs and I'm like, yeah, I don't know what to do, man. Because his stuff's challenging for me.
Yeah, it's really like, even from my own perspective, it's actually really hard to sing over chaotic music. You wouldn't think so. Like, you'd think like, oh, you just jump in and just start going off or whatever. But like, there's a certain ebb and flow. Those songs might sound chaotic the first few times you listen to them, but as it goes on, there is a certain ebb and flow and changes that you have to keep up with vocally that it's frankly just very challenging. And like, I could never, I could never imagine trying to sing for like Dillinger, or something like that. Like, like singing over Calculating Infinity. Like, I don't even know how like else it could possibly be done. And so like for that, it's very uncompromising, and I mean, I'm pretty stoked to hear the record, and Travis dropped a hint the other day in a text message saying like, dude, wait till you hear the rest of the stuff. He's like, this is he's like, this is literally just like a tip. He's like, that was the most digestible one.
What's fun to me is that when we came into that song, I wasn't excited about it at all. I don't like verse chorus. And when I do verse chorus, I tend to not repeat lyrics. And studio producer Brian's like, just try it and let's see how it works. And and we hammered it out. And coming out the back end of the song, like there was decisions we made, and I was like, yeah, fine. And you like kind of hear it all come together. And you're like, oh wow, that's pretty good. There's been some of that, but there's some songs that we have on the docket that I'm like, these ones I'm super excited about. And like if that was like the low point and these ones are going to be higher, I'm excited for other people to hear them.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'm pretty stoked. I ordered a shirt, so
sweet.
I will be repping, here soon. And plus, I just really needed a new shirt. All my shirts have holes in them and stuff, and it's been not great. I've been on a weight loss regimen for a while, so I'm hoping I can fit into some of those older shirts that I have.
Well, dude, the struggle is real. I suffer through it too, so I completely empathize with you.
Yeah, I felt like I've just been eating nothing but plants for weeks, and and now I'm sick too. So it's one of those like wanting to reach out to those comfort foods, but yeah, luckily, everything's since I have I'm saying luckily, that's weird. Luckily, having a COVID test and waiting for that to come back means I really can't go anywhere. So it would be really hard for me to make bad decisions, even if I wanted to.
They just opened up a Wahlburgers by us. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but like the Wahlberg family, they have their own chain of hamburger joints, and they just opened up one, and the lines have been out the door. So I'm pretty sure this weekend my wife and I are going over there. So nice. I'll start dieting next week.
There you go. Yeah, I've been saying that for about 4 years. So I think I thought now was probably the best time to try it out. Well, and not to shift the conversation too far off track, but one thing that you and I kind of connected on. It's funny too. I feel like we connected on Facebook more on video games than music, or at least it was like a big part of it. Because I remember I was on the Metal Jesus Rocks group for a while, and I started posting, and then I saw you would post things, or sometimes you'd reply to some of my posts, and you were the only person that I was friends with on Facebook that was like part of one scene. And so I remember thinking it odd, like, oh, we actually have like another retro gamer here. Because like I'm so used to like, seeing your name in like music related stuff. Yeah. And so to go kind of into this other world that I don't really talk about very much, but love to talk. I would love to do a video game podcast, but I feel like that market is very oversaturated. Yeah. But what got you into gaming?
I don't remember a time where I wasn't video gaming. So like, maybe like as early as 6, I wasn't, but like right after that. So like in the early 90s, I think it was my dad bought us a Nintendo for Christmas. Cause I think I mentioned my dad was a Baptist pastor, and we lived super rural. So like the town that we lived in wasn't even on the map because it was so small. So we didn't have a whole lot to do, and my dad bought us this original NES when I was probably like 6 or 7, and I got a handful of games. I got classic Mario Brothers, and then we got Ninja Turtles, the Manhattan Project, and then the original Metal Gear, and a couple other games. So I've always had that around, and I've moved so much in my life that I don't like getting rid of things because I hate change. So I just never got rid of a whole lot of stuff from my childhood. I've been lucky in that sense, and kind of just hoarded everything. So along the way, I upgraded to Super Nintendo, then slowly to 64, and I typically upgrade to a system a generation 2 after it's gone. So like I got Xbox when 360 was like brand new, and I got an Xbox One maybe a year ago. So I've always kind of been into video games, but I'm more of a social video gamer. I like to do it with other people. So Xbox Live's been nice for that because you can do it at a distance. But I've also loved garage sailing, and I'm super into like collecting DVDs, comic books, action figures, things like that. And I kind of have a running list of this is what I'm looking for when I go to a garage sale, and on that list would be video games. So whenever I'd run across something, even if my stuff was all boxed up, I'd pick it up. And I've just slowly over time accumulated a decent collection. And my daughter turned 4 this last year, and I live to do stuff with her. Like, it's just what life is about for me. And like I'll show her music, and just watching her respond to music. She's a huge Me Without You fan, which is amazing.
Well, we all are. It's part of being human.
Yes, thank you. I was like, I wonder if she'll like video games. And she's a very strong-willed child, so I try and show her controls, and she'd get irritated, and she wouldn't be able to complete the game, but she wouldn't let me help her either. But she started growing into this person who was like interested in it. So my wife was kind enough to let me take over a guest room in our basement and turn it into a video game room. And at school, I got one of their CRTVs, and I set it up in the basement with a switch box. So I have all the different systems set up, 8 separate systems now, hooked up to that TV. And like I'll hunt games specifically for her. So I tracked down Little Mermaid for Nintendo, and I think I got like some Sonic games for her because they're simple to play, and she would like that type of gameplay. So a lot of gaming for me, it like revolves around her. I mean, I'm super into things like shooters like PUBG on Xbox One, or I'm obsessed with Skyrim. But like I'll play those things, but I'd rather be playing things with her.
Me being sick all day, I had my my 6-year-old little girl downstairs with me a good portion of the day, and yeah, we played. Well, we actually just played Wii Sports she did. I felt like garbage, so that seemed like the worst game to play. But she really,
I could get the move.
yeah. So I just literally laid there on the couch and just let her do her thing, and yeah, that is so much fun. Just kind of passing that on, because it's funny. So like when I was a little kid, we didn't really have video games too much. We had computer games, but we didn't have like so you grew up Baptist, I grew up Pentecostal. They were a little bit more this is what you can and can't have in your house, and so there was never really a place for video games. So I didn't really get into gaming until I was probably a little bit older. Probably trying to think now. I can't. My brain's like probably when I was like 12 or 13. I got a Super Nintendo. Maybe it was younger. Maybe it was younger than that.
What games are your go-to games for Super Nintendo?
Well, I was like, okay, so it was at the same time that I was really, really into Star Wars.
Okay.
So, Super Star Wars trilogy, like Super Star Wars, Super Empire Strikes Back, Super Return of the Jedi. Those are staples. I can actually still beat those games in my sleep. I love them, even though they're considered to be notoriously difficult, which
I have not gotten deep into either of the three.
Yeah, so. They're kind of hard. Don't play them on the medium difficulty. Play them on easy first, because they're nearly impossible if you start off. Like I can beat them on Jedi mode now, which is like the hard mode, but like that was like years of practice. But that Super Mario RPG, Legend of the Seven Stars, that was one of the first RPGs I ever played, and I really fell in love with that genre. You just needed somebody familiar like Mario to introduce you to something like that. So I got really into RPGs for a while due to that. So like games like Chrono Trigger and Secret of Mana, and like
I've never played that, but I've heard a lot about that game.
Secret of Mana.
Yeah.
That one's a little different. That one's actually more, I would say it's more like noob friendly in the sense of like, it's like more like Zelda, but you have like stats and stuff and you level up and stuff like that. So it is still very much an RPG, but the gameplay is like more action focused. What about you? Super Nintendo, what are your go-tos?
I like you could take every game except for Mortal Kombat 2 and Mario Kart, and I'd be happy. Like I remember getting Mortal Kombat. I'm like, I'm gonna get in trouble because like this is such a violent game.
Yeah.
And then like memorize all the fatalities and then throw the paper away type of thing. But
right.
Mortal Kombat, like I Mortal Kombat 2 is one of my all-time favorite games, and then my sister and we love playing Mario Kart, so we play that for hours.
It's funny you say Mario Kart. I've been kind of my sleep cycle's all messed up due to being sick, so I sleep a lot during the day and stay up at night. And I've been playing Mario Kart on Super Nintendo, and I loved that game as a kid, but playing it now, there's just some things about it that irritate me to death. Like you know how like in the original Mario Kart, the other racers didn't use the same weapons that you used. So like, you know, you could get, you know, the variety, like the slot machine of which item you were going to get. But the other characters all had their own. So like the princess could fire a mushroom that would shrink you. And I think Toad had one, and Yoshi could throw an egg at you. Bowser threw fireballs. But Mario and Luigi are straight up cheaters because their special move is a star. Yeah, so like you're playing on Rainbow Road on 150cc, which is like the hardest difficulty in that game, and you're racing around a corner and you just got to get past Mario to get past that finish line, and he just bumps a star and hits you and you're dead. Like it's just, and you've lost the race, 8th place, it's over. As a kid, I apparently could handle things better than I can as an adult, but like I was like screaming at the TV.
I think you're exactly right, because I think we had so few games as kids that you're like, I'm just going to deal with it and let's go do it again. But now, like, I'll be playing games with my daughter and I'll get frustrated. I'm like, and like get mad, and then she'll look up at me and she'll do it too. I'm like, oh, I need to chill out because she's going to pick up some of these bad habits.
I need to tone it down a little bit here. Yeah. So you mentioned a lot of Nintendo stuff. Did you ever go to the dark side? Go to Sega for anything?
You know what? I was late to the party on Sega. When we first moved out to Illinois after my parents separated, I spent a lot of time with this one family friend, and he had Sega. So I picked up Sega like the late 2010, somewhere around there, and I just started. I went through a sequence like over a couple of years in like 2009, 2010, 2011, where I was like, okay, this summer I'm going to get Sega and I'm going to look for Sega games. And next summer I'm going to get PlayStation 1. I'm going to get PlayStation games because I had friends who had that. And I remember playing Tony Hawk for hours, and then eventually PlayStation 2. And like, I'm going to get Grand Theft Auto, and I'm going to put on all the God cheats and just run around and kill people and wait for the cops to come. But so like over time, I just picked up each system that I didn't have. I stopped at PlayStation 2. I eventually got a Wii, and Wii's like probably the one system I don't play a whole lot, but I'm waiting to get certain games for my daughter because I know she'll really like them.
Yeah, but totally.
I did pick up some of those other systems. I have a small group of friends who are into retro video games. And like once every couple months we'll get together and do retro game day. And like I never played Altered Beast before, but I had it, and we sat down, played it, and we beat it, and like that was a blast, you know. So stuff like that.
That's cool. Yeah. Yeah. Sega was always kind of we were mainly Nintendo. I know I had a Super Nintendo, and then we got a Nintendo 64 pretty shortly after that. Like I came a little late to the game on Super Nintendo, but we got a 64, and I got it's so funny. I got Shadows of the Empire and for Christmas one year. I got a Nintendo 64, Star Fox 64, Super Mario 64, and Star Wars Shadows of the Empire. And I remember they only got me because I really wanted GoldenEye because that's what all my friends played and talked about incessantly. And so I was like, I got to get this 007 game. My parents bought me the Star Wars game instead because they thought that they thought GoldenEye was like a little too violent, which is kind of laughable now, but like, but back then it was like, you know, hyper realistic graphics or whatever. And, you know, it's
like them can be.
But then, like, have you played Shadows of the Empire?
It does not hold up.
Well, it doesn't hold up, but from a violence level, it's like just as bad, if not worse, than Goldeneye. Like you're still shooting stormtroopers and they're falling off cliffs and screaming as they fall to their deaths and stuff.
Yeah.
Like it was so funny that they're like, no, this game would be more kid appropriate than this game. But in reality, I guess there was no blood in Shadows of the Empire. I guess that was the whole thing. But yeah, it's not the best game. I thought it was amazing when it came out because
I really wanted that one. I'm sorry, I don't mean to keep talking over you.
No, you're good.
I really wanted that one because I was late to the party on that. So I think I got that like a year or two ago. And I was a huge Shadows of the Empire fan. I picked up the toys and everything, and I love the backstory for Dash Rendar and all that stuff. And I was super stoked to play that. And I was like, this isn't good. But so I was a little bummed out about it. But it's probably one of those things where I just didn't have the nostalgia connection to keep me there.
Yeah, I mean, the problem with going back to Nintendo 64 games now is that like they're at like 20 frames a second, if that.
Yeah.
And they're not smooth at all. And like, cause even Goldeneye, you go back and play Goldeneye now and you're like, how did I ever play this game without two analog sticks? Like, I don't.
Yeah. That is weird.
Yeah. And like, you don't really aim in Goldeneye. You point in, it's like playing Doom, like you just point in a general direction and fire and it just auto hits, and, yeah, so a lot of those old shooters are really hard to play nowadays. But yeah, I got a 64, and then after that I got really curious about old school gaming, so I picked up with my birthday money one year, I went to a game store and bought a Nintendo and like Legend of Zelda and all, because I wanted to play like all the older games, and so I got all of those. But stupidly, when the Dreamcast came out, I think it was like year 2000 or maybe 2001, and I had no idea like what the market was, so I didn't know that the Dreamcast was on its way out. So I sold my Nintendo, Super Nintendo, and I kept the N64. But I sold like all the games, all the stuff, and bought a Sega Dreamcast and Sonic Adventure, and it was like probably the dumbest thing I'd ever done. Besides,
like those Dreamcasts are still kind of collectible because they're low run.
Yeah. Well, the disc drive on that Dreamcast stopped working after like a year, so I ended up getting another Dreamcast. But then all my buddies had PS2s and would like make fun of me because like I was the cool kid on the block for like 2 weeks because I had a Dreamcast, and then the PlayStation 2 came out and it was all over. Like they're all playing Twisted Metal Black and all these awesome PS2 games, and I'm like just basically sitting there in the dust with my Dreamcast. Like, well, can't believe I sold my Zelda games for this.
Yeah, I got lucky because I had the original NES, like the boxy one, and it started to fail. And when we moved out here, I had like wanted to start playing my NES again, and I went to Walmart, and on clearance they had the top loader NES, which I don't know if you're aware, but those are super hard to come by.
Yeah,
I've got one. Yeah, $30 for it, and it was boxed and everything, and that's what I use now. So I mean, I can't mod for the stupid Zayo cartridge.
Does yours have so when you're playing it, do you notice like lines on the screen? They're like they're not heavy lines, but they're like permanently etched in the background.
I don't know if that's I've had lines, but I feel like they're more connection issues than they are the system itself, because I've upgraded cables and actually upgraded the TV, and I haven't had any of that stuff.
Okay.
But I have noticed it once in a great while, but I typically don't pay too close attention to it.
Gotcha. Yeah, mine had that pretty bad, but I bought mine. At one point, I had like 3 top loaders, and I sold 2 of them for like $100 each. They became insanely collectible.
Yeah.
After a while, but I always liked them just because you don't have the pin problems that you had with the old NES.
Yeah.
But yeah, no Zayo cartridge for me either. Because I just don't.
I'm going to buy a regular one so I can mod it for the Zayo cartridge because I want to hear it.
Just have an NES that's dedicated directly just to listen to a Zayo record.
It's worth it.
Totally. But I'd say in recent years I've moved away from the console. I had kind of an incident a couple years ago where I ended up having to sell most of my stuff, my physical games. Still kept all the systems though, because in the back of my mind, I was like, well, maybe I could, maybe I can start collecting the games again for him, and at least I'll still have the hardware, to play them on. But as I've gotten older and had more kids, I have 4 kids, so I realized pretty quickly that was never going to happen. So I just started buying like those Ever drives for the systems where you can load up all the games onto one cartridge and then you just have it. But you're still playing it on the original hardware, so it's like kind of the same. Like I've got a CRT TV set up here specifically just for old gaming. And actually, this CRT is going to stay with the house because it's a Sony Trinitron and it weighs like 250 pounds. So it's just going to stay here, I think, even when I move out.
I have a newer one. It's like one of the last generation Sony ones they made. And getting it in the house, I was an idiot and decided to do it barefoot, almost ripped my toenail off and like bleeding all the way downstairs. And my wife's like, that was stupid. Was it worth it? It's like, yes, it was.
What are those? Those are called like the Wegas, I think.
I don't know. But I mean, this one has internet connections and it's like barely been used because people don't use those type of TVs in 2009.
Right.
So
that's awesome.
I mean, it worked out for me. I got it for free from work. So
there you go. Can't argue with free. You just have to be able to move it.
It's funny because you were saying you were going for like the digital. I'm. Everyone makes fun of me, Brian specifically, because I'm so anachronistic. I'm not a person who enjoys technology. Yeah. So I still buy CDs. I would prefer a band put out CD. I almost prefer it to vinyl. And I'm still buying DVDs. I got close to 2,000 DVDs. Like I don't want digital streaming, although we have it, And then with the cartridges, and it's the same thing, man. Cartridges or disc, I'd rather have that. But yet there's an efficiency piece that people really value. But for me, like the server's never going to go down. I've got it. It's here,
Yeah, I think for me, it was just not wanting to deal with the heartbreak of my children breaking something. And then me actually getting mad at them over something so trivial. I think was kind of the biggest, because like I'm not going to sit there and yell at a 6-year-old because she stepped on a controller and broke it or something like that. I mean, okay, I will do that and I'll feel really bad about it, because it's like, oh, you broke daddy's toys because daddy's not actually an adult. He's a child trapped in a man's body, So it's definitely hard with that. And even with CDs and stuff, I freak out about my physical, because I'm very much that way about music. I always have to have physical, but at the same time, like I just recently set up a computer where all my music is now on that computer, and it's integrated into my stereo system, so I can pull Spotify up and stream music as well as play music on MP3 or WAV. I do a lot of WAV files, which requires way too much hard drive space. Yeah. But I don't like to compromise the sound by mixing it down to an MP3. So it's one of those, like, which is funny because some of the records that I listen to sound like total garbage, like they were recorded badly. So like it doesn't really matter. Like it's ridiculous to be such an audiophile about it. But
with me and music, I would totally do that repository of all that digital, but I still have to have that hard copy. Like it's just sheer stubbornness. But I think you probably get it. Like it's the collector. Like you and I were talking, you don't want to like every color vinyl, but you want one of those vinyls, Yeah. So I don't know. It's expensive, but the way I think so.
Collecting is very expensive, and that's part of why I've stopped doing it too. Is I just like his with like Nintendo collecting and stuff. I was really hardcore into Nintendo collecting for a long time, and I had. But I had to ask myself, like, how far am I willing to go with this? Because if I want to complete the whole collection, I'm gonna need a game. I'm gonna need a game like Little Samson, and that game's like thousands of dollars. Like, am I just gonna leave that out of the collection? But if I complete the whole collection besides that and like 4 other games, then it's gonna eat away at me. And then it's like, if I'm paying what I could pay for a down payment on a car, why? At that point, I have to start looking at my priorities and think to myself, like, why would I do that?
I'm lucky when it comes to video games because I'm not there. But with music and with like comic books, I am. And that's the problematic area. With video games, it's more like, I don't have Final Fantasy VII, so I want to go get that, but I don't need everything Final Fantasy.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I feel you on that. I'm definitely more of a hoarder when it comes to music, for sure. Like, I wouldn't sell my CDs or sell my tapes. I've still got tapes and
Yeah.
and vinyl. I'm not as it's weird. I'm still kind of on the fence as to where I'm going with vinyl, because vinyl's great, but at the same time it's also very expensive and very limited, in the sense that you could just miss out. Like, there was a Norma Jean vinyl that went on sale one day while I was at work, and I was like, all right, well, I'll just get one as soon as I get off work here, and then by the time I was off work, they were all gone.
Was that Polar Similar, or was it the next one?
No. It was I have Polar Similar on vinyl, but I've got it. No, it was however you pronounce the name of this record, Maradonial. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and so that was that one.
The M1.
Yeah, and I'd love to have all the Norma Jean stuff on vinyl, but as of now, I've got, I think, Oh God, the Aftermath, which is a reissue, and I've got the Polar Similar box set. My mother-in-law snagged that by some miracle. Cool. Like, yeah, she just, because it was gone whenever I had ponied up enough cash to be able to buy it. It was already gone, and I was like, oh, okay, whatever. And then like 2 months later, I unwrapped it under the Christmas tree, and was super stoked about that. And then I got, obviously, like, their new one. But yeah, as far as those older records, those are just going to be so hard to track down.
Yeah, I'm really only of the mind that, like, it has to be a special album for me to get on vinyl, and the only exceptions to that would be Zao or Me Without You. Like, I want the total discography, and I'm pretty much done with Zao, and then I just need some of the obscure stuff for Me Without You. And I'm always looking for that stuff, and those are the only ones I'll pay out the nose for. Like, there's like, I almost picked up Beloved, the Running EP today, and I was like, I don't want to spend $40 on this. Like, I've got it on CD; it's a great album, but I don't need that on vinyl.
And it's not even a full length.
Yeah, I saw Shia Lude, that was Blood Ill Tempered. That was $15. Why not? Like, it's a freaking amazing album.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, Shai Hulud. I got Misanthropy Pure, which is my favorite record by them.
Really?
Yeah, I know. It's unpopular opinion. But I love that record so much. I even tried to when I talked to Matt Fox on this podcast, I tried really hard to, like, not be like, dude, that's like the greatest record you guys ever did, because it's objectively not. But as far as my personal preferences for it, I always loved Shai Hulud. I love how melodic and intense they were, but I'm a meathead, so I like stuff to be just a little bit heavier, a little bit more extreme. And that record just had so much more, like, grit and like piss and vinegar to it, that the other records, didn't have as consistently as that one. I'm being really political here, because I can't ever say a bad thing about a Shai Hulud record. So
no, that's like almost sinful. I saw them on the tour cycle for that album, but it was with Shockwave, and it was with Wisdom in Chains. That was one of the best shows I've ever been to.
That would have been cool to see Shockwave. I've never seen Shockwave live.
I was an idiot. Like, they posted, hey, we're playing Erie, PA, and I'm like, Erie, like Lake Erie? That's got to be up north. So I bought tickets, and like, oh crap, this is freaking Pennsylvania.
Right?
But it was worth it, man. It was totally worth it.
Yeah. Did they come out with, like, banners and stuff?
Yeah, they did the whole 9 yards. It
was so cool.
When them, Seven Angels, a couple other bands, you're like, yeah, I saw that. That was great.
Yeah, Shockwave's one of those bands that, like, they're a band I don't ever really talk about, but, like, my God, they're like in my top 5, and I don't even know why. Like if you consider all, like, the technical music and all the stuff I listen to for the show, when it comes to my actual preferences, a lot of my favorite bands are bands that I would not, like, talk nicely about on the show. You
got to talk about them, and you got to do Me Without You.
Well, I did do Me Without You.
Did you? I have to go look for that.
Got to go back and find it. Yeah, it's Brian Patton from As the Story Grows was on that one as well, going through all their stuff. And he actually just interviewed Greg from Me Without You.
Yeah, I just listened to it. It's a very good interview.
Yeah, I haven't gotten to hear it yet, but yeah, it's so a lot of cool stuff going on with Me Without You, but it's kind of depressing too, because I know that, like, they're pretty much going to be gone or they're planning on hanging it up.
I'm hoping that this weird hiatus is going to kind of give them the juice they need.
Possibly. I mean, that's why they didn't say like straight up that they were just going to quit, but that they were going to cease active status, you know, if that's the politically correct way to say it. But yeah, they just, it's not a hard no. And I get it, because like I've talked to a lot of bands that are like have either been on hiatus forever or are now defunct, but end up being like, you know, if the situation was right, we'd do it. You know?
Yeah.
And a lot of the time that leads to a record.
Decades, you know, like they've been going on for a while, so I get it. But I'm selfish, man. Every 2 years, new Me Without You album that you can sit on for 6 months, and it's just fresh and juicy.
Yep, totally. Well, I think this would be a good place for us to end for tonight. My wife's going to bed upstairs, so I probably need to help her with the baby and all that. But Jesse, thanks so much, man, for taking the time out tonight. This was a really fun chat, and I like doing some of these more just conversational interviews, and so yeah, I really appreciate you taking the time. And dude, I'm super stoked about this Satire material that's coming out.
I can't thank you enough for having me on. Like, I don't know that I'm deserving of this, but I think it was a blast, and I love that you that songs like resonated with you so much. So I'm looking forward to putting it out and just seeing how it hits people, and I'm just glad that it hit so hard with you. So
definitely,
thanks for having me around. It's great.
Yeah, anytime.